something explosive was brewing beneath the polished image of royalty, and according to a storm of accusations, it may have finally burst into the open. What happens when the woman at the center of one of the most controversial royal stories in modern history suddenly finds herself facing claims from a man who once knew her better than anyone else? What happens when an ex-husband steps out of the shadows and starts talking? And what happens when those words allegedly send shockwaves straight into the heart of Buckingham Palace itself? That is exactly the firestorm now consuming headlines, social media, and royal watchers around the world, because the moment Trevor Engelson allegedly broke years of silence. The conversation stopped being about old relationships and started becoming something much bigger, much darker, and much more dangerous. Across the internet, people were suddenly asking the same question. Why now? Why would Trevor, after all these years, allegedly decide to step forward and revisit a chapter of his life that had been closed for over a decade? Some believed it was revenge. Others believed it was frustration. But many were convinced there was something else hiding beneath the surface, something that had been building quietly for years. Because according to the allegations being discussed, Trevor wasn't simply reflecting on a failed marriage. He was allegedly painting a picture of a woman whose ambition stretched far beyond fame, far beyond Hollywood, and perhaps even beyond the royal family itself. The claims spread like wildfire. Every interview clip, every reported statement, every whispered allegation became fuel for a growing media inferno. Suddenly, old stories were being reopened. Old timelines were being examined. Old decisions were being viewed through an entirely different lens. And the more people looked, the more questions emerged. Was this merely the bitterness of an ex-husband? Or was it the beginning of a larger unraveling that nobody inside royal circles had anticipated? According to the allegations, Trevor revisited the early years of their marriage, describing a relationship that allegedly changed dramatically as opportunities expanded. The story being told was not one of a fairy tale romance collapsing overnight. Instead, it was presented as a slow transformation, a gradual shift, a pattern that allegedly became impossible to ignore. Every new opportunity appeared to create new distance. Every new achievement seemed to widen existing cracks, and eventually those cracks became impossible to hide. Then came the accusations that truly ignited controversy. Claims that Meghan allegedly viewed relationships through the lens of opportunity. Claims that she allegedly pushed relentlessly toward bigger platforms, bigger influence, and bigger visibility. Whether those accusations are true or not, their impact was immediate, because once those words entered the public conversation, they collided directly with years of existing criticism surrounding the Sussex saga. What made the situation even more explosive was the timing. The royal family was already facing scrutiny from every direction. Tensions surrounding Harry and Meghan had never fully disappeared. Public opinion remained deeply divided, and into that already volatile environment came allegations suggesting that Prince Harry himself might simply be the latest chapter in a much larger story. That possibility sent social media into complete overdrive. People began dissecting every interview, every documentary appearance, every public statement. Some claimed they could suddenly see patterns they had previously ignored. Others insisted the accusations were outrageous and unfair. But regardless of which side people chose, one thing became impossible to deny. The conversation had changed completely, and then came what many considered the most shocking claim of all, the prediction. According to the allegations being circulated, Trevor supposedly warned that if royal titles were ever removed, the future of the Sussex marriage could face serious danger. That statement alone detonated across headlines like a bomb, because whether people believed it or not, it introduced a terrifying question into the public imagination. What happens if the royal connection disappears? What remains when the titles, prestige, and symbolism are gone? Suddenly, Prince Harry found himself at the center of an entirely new narrative, not because of anything he had said, not because of any action he had taken, but because people were now wondering whether he was standing in the middle of a storm he couldn't even see approaching. And while those questions multiplied, reports suggested that Meghan was furious, absolutely furious. Sources and commentators described a situation where silence was no longer an option. The accusations had become too public, too direct, and too damaging to ignore. A response was inevitable. What nobody expected was just how intense the battle was about to become. Because what started as an ex-husband allegedly sharing his perspective was rapidly evolving into a full-scale media war. A war involving accusations, denials, reputations, and potentially the future of one of the most controversial royal marriages of the modern era. And if the first wave of allegations was enough to shake public opinion, the next developments would allegedly push this entire saga into territory far more explosive than anyone imagined possible. The situation allegedly spiraled from controversy into absolute chaos the moment the next wave of claims entered the public arena. What had already been a damaging dispute suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous because the conversation was no longer focused only on Trevor Engelson's accusations. Instead, attention shifted toward what many described as alleged evidence, alleged private communications, and alleged behind-the-scenes interactions that seemed to raise even more questions than answers. The media frenzy exploded. Comment sections became battlefields. Every television panel, every social media discussion, and every royal commentator appeared to be dissecting the same question. Was this merely another celebrity feud, or was something much larger unfolding behind closed palace doors? According to the allegations circulating through media reports and online discussions, Trevor allegedly escalated the conflict by claiming he possessed information that painted a deeply troubling picture of Meghan's motives and long-term ambitions. Those claims immediately ignited public outrage because they touched on subjects that royal institutions take extremely seriously: trust, loyalty, influence, and public reputation. Suddenly, what had begun as a personal dispute was being framed as a controversy capable of reaching the very foundations of the monarchy itself. As headlines multiplied, pressure allegedly intensified inside royal circles. Observers began speculating that Buckingham Palace could no longer afford to remain a passive spectator while the monarchy's name was repeatedly dragged into an increasingly toxic public spectacle. Every new accusation generated more headlines. Every denial created fresh debate. And every hour seemed to bring another layer of drama. The silence from official royal channels only fueled further speculation. For many commentators, that silence itself became suspicious. Was the palace carefully monitoring the situation? Were discussions taking place behind closed doors? Or was something much more significant being considered? Meanwhile, according to the narrative spreading online, Prince Harry allegedly found himself trapped in the middle of an impossible situation. On one side stood his wife, fiercely rejecting the accusations and portraying herself as the victim of a coordinated campaign. On the other side stood growing public scrutiny, relentless media coverage, and questions that refused to disappear. For years, Harry had defended Meghan against criticism. He had challenged institutions, confronted the press, and distanced himself from parts of his former royal life. But now, according to the rumors dominating public conversation, he was allegedly being forced to confront allegations originating from people who knew Meghan long before royal titles entered the picture. Then came another dramatic twist. Discussions allegedly emerged involving former associates and individuals from Meghan's past who were said to be offering their own accounts and experiences. Whether verified or not, these stories added fuel to an already raging fire. The public appetite for scandal seemed endless. Every new allegation became another viral headline. Every appearance generated millions of views. Every denial only encouraged further debate. Instead of calming down, the controversy appeared to be feeding itself. As the pressure mounted, attention shifted toward Buckingham Palace and the possibility of consequences. Rumors spread that royal officials were becoming increasingly frustrated with the damage being inflicted upon the monarchy's public image. Commentators speculated about ultimatums, reviews, and potential restrictions. Whether those claims held any truth or not almost became irrelevant because public perception had already taken over. The story had become bigger than facts alone. It had become a symbol of a larger conflict between reputation, power, ambition, and public trust. At the same time, another narrative began gaining momentum. Many online observers started comparing Meghan's past relationships with her current position, claiming they saw repeating patterns. Critics argued that every major chapter of her life appeared connected to a larger pursuit of influence and status. Supporters fiercely rejected those accusations, insisting that Meghan was being unfairly targeted because of her success and visibility. The divide became enormous. People were no longer simply discussing events. They were choosing sides. And through all of it, one possibility continued to cast a shadow over the entire story. The possibility that this controversy was not ending anytime soon. Because if more allegations emerged, if additional voices entered the conversation, or if further evidence was ever presented, the consequences could become even more explosive. Questions surrounding royal titles, public image, and the future of Harry and Meghan would only grow louder. Now the world is left watching and waiting to see whether this storm eventually burns itself out or whether it becomes the beginning of an even larger royal crisis. Waiting to see whether Prince Harry continues standing firmly firmly beside Meghan, or whether the relentless pressure eventually creates fractures that can no longer be hidden. And perhaps most importantly, waiting to see whether this alleged media earthquake has revealed only the first crack in a story that is still far from over. Because if history has taught royal watchers anything, it is that the biggest revelations often arrive long after everyone believes the drama has ended.